Looks good. Hey, it's Fudge. Welcome, Fudge. Just trying to finish like setting up here, and we'll get started. Okay, cool. I'll get into that. Okay, so this is the Sausage Sports Club weekly update. I do this every week, or I mean, there's been like some skippage the last month or so just from like GDC, and I was at a wedding, but welcome to Baker. But yeah, I do these every week. I do it for 4 reasons now. One is I think it's a valuable resource for new developers or students. 2, I think it's a good kind of archive of the history of the project, so that in 5 or 10 years I'll be able to look back and see how what was my process like for making sausage, and that'll be cool. Another one is marketing. Like, it's obviously good to talk about the game and have new content every week, just so people stay tuned or stay interested or whatever. And then the 4th one is, as I've been doing this, I've noticed people sometimes come into chat and say like, oh hey, you could be doing that in a different way, it would be better. Hey Luna, what's going on, Chris? Yeah, so that's why I like to do this. I try to do it every week, and as it's gotten closer to the end, I've kind of started talking more also about like what's left to do, because it's getting down to the end of it, and I feel like the motivation and thought process is useful too. So like I said at the start, last week I missed because I was on Train Jam and kind of like got into GDC, and then my hostel didn't have great internet, so I couldn't really stream. But I figured it would be cool to like go over Train Jam and just like play that game and talk about it, since that took up a lot of my week last time. Hey Alex, welcome. So let's do that. So if you've been on Twitter, you probably saw me tweet like GIFs or whatever what the Train Jam game was, but this is a game called Junk Jumble, if I can find it. There it is. Okay. Yeah, so this is Junk Jumble. It's a game that I actually worked on with Lunaland in the comments here. It was Chris and Chris team. I think it's going to open, maybe? Maybe it won't. That's weird. Maybe if I open it from the itch app. Pull that over here for a second. Yeah, the reason I want to show it is because it was like a fun game jam, and the first one I've done in a while, and kind of a nice break from sausage. Kind of let me come back refreshed, staying away from it for a while. Cool, that looks like it's gonna work. That's probably super loud. You turn it down. Okay, cool. Yes, me and Chris worked on this. You play as a pile of garbage. Should hear a little bit of audio. Okay. Yes, you play as a pile of garbage, and you kind of like click stuff and slingshot it. And by doing so, you can get through the level. There's like some blocks to push and stuff. And as you get these white dot power-ups, you get a bigger radius of selection, this like circle. And so you can throw more shit at once, so it gets more wild and crazy. Get more. And it's kind of just like a platformer explorer thing. Break some blocks. There's some like fun water stuff that Unity 2D kind of just has built in. even on my like good gaming rig, it still runs kind of bad. Cool. Then our credit sequence is just like some fun toys at the end. Yeah, it was fun. Cool. So that was Train Jam. I'm still pretty jazzed about the game. I feel like the mechanic is pretty interesting, and it could make for like a whole game exploring that idea. In the second half of the jam, I was kind of like pitching a bunch of ideas I knew we didn't have time for at other Chris, and it was just like I was super excited about it, and I feel like that kind of mechanic where there's like a lot of ripe fruit, like obvious things you can do, make for like a good foundation to build a game on, because if it's easy to generate lots of ideas, then you'll have lots of options to pick from, and you can like only pick the good ones. So it's pretty excited about that. Yeah, and you should definitely follow Chris Lunoland in the chat and check out his game Year in the Trees. It's like a cool pixel art, chill out RPG thing. It's gonna be sweet. Yeah, so that's Train Jam. Guess this could have gone second in my list here. So another thing that kind of happened before Train Jam and was kind of happening during Train Jam and like during the first couple days of GDC is I've been sending out like a friend feedback build to people I trust, just like a big spiel of thanks for supporting the game, like here's some stuff that would be really useful for me if you could like give me your feedback on this, you know, be super honest, like let me know when you get bored, how long you enjoyed playing, what your favorite mode was, what you didn't like in the different modes, things that don't make sense. Specifically, I'm interested in when people get bored and stop and why they stop. And I've kind of slowly been getting feedback in from people. A lot of the people I send the build to were either already on their way to GDC or were about to go to GDC. So they were like, I want to play this, I want to give you feedback, but it'll have to wait until I get back. So that was like some people. But a few people have already given me like pretty in-depth feedback. One person specifically gave me a lot of feedback about adventure mode, which I really needed, and some of the stuff I was kind of worried about was a problem for them when they were trying to play. So I'm gonna need to revisit some of that stuff. Specifically, it's like when you play adventure mode, it's the context of adventure mode and like what the season structure is and what the entire structure of the adventure mode isn't really explained well, so it can feel kind of aimless or like you're not sure what's happening. And also when you're looking for quests in the overworld, at a certain point along the campaign, once the overworld's opened up, the number of quests that spawn there don't like grow as much as the world grows, so you end up looking for like maybe like 4 or 5 quests placed over this big world, and it can be kind of hard to find the quest. So that was like that was something I was worried about, and kind of something this person ran into and was like, here's some ideas I have about it, and we kind of like bounced ideas off each other, so that was good. Another person, my buddy Pete, who works at Alchemy, played through. I don't even know if he got to the game, but he just like really like busted the menus up and like gave me lots of really good feedback on usability of the menu and like weird like problems when they would go into the player select and them and their friend would be like, oh, how do I join? Like, oh, how do I add a bot? This kind of stuff. And that was really useful. It was maybe the first day I sent out builds, Pete like went and played a bunch, and I was on Facebook just like in chat talking to Pete, and Pete would say a thing and I'd be like, oh, that's cool, like I know how to fix that, and then I'd do it and then upload another build to Steam and then be like, Pete, download the new build. So it was kind of like a fun back and forth. Yeah, let's see if I can show this email that I send people, the spiel. I think I sent myself like a Yeah. Anybody's... I don't want to bring this whole thing over. Okay. So this is the email I sent. It's like, I'm writing you because I need help. Game's like almost done. If you could play for like 2 to 3 hours, give me any feedback you have at all, but specifically like this stuff here, which is what I mentioned before. Yeah, I'm specifically focused on like, I want this to feel like a real full finished game, and anything that doesn't feel like that, I really need critical feedback on it. So that's why I'm sending it to so many people who will all have different opinions and stuff. Yeah, progression, something I'm not super experienced with, and I feel like it's really important to like retention of players over the course of one play session, that they unlock enough stuff to like be interested in getting the next thing. And somebody gave me feedback actually that even though they like recognize that they're getting stuff and it feels good to get stuff, they don't know why or like how they could optimize that process. Like at the end of a match, the unlock bar comes up and just like fills up, and there's no like feedback besides like you finished a match of how many points you got or like why you got X amount of points. And really that's not like the logic behind it isn't really that based on what you're doing. It's really more based on like how long did the match last, and if it lasted a long time, I can assume that you were tied and that it was probably an intense match, and that's like all I'm doing. But it would be cool to have like to use stats about your match as like the reason you're getting the points you get. Like I do track a bunch of stats of like how many like shots were taken with a soccer ball, or like how much paint was thrown, or how much did you move, how much did you swing your head, this kind of stuff. So there's probably some way I could process that, all those like data points into something interesting and like good useful feedback for the players of like, oh, we did I don't know, we took a lot of long shots at a soccer goal, or like we were running around more than is common, so we got extra points for that. And like really there's a bounds in which I want your like unlock progress to go per game, but kind of personalizing that to the actual match a little bit, even if the number isn't very different, like I think would be useful and motivating, and I don't know, it would be a nice touch at least. So there's that. What else is in this email? Steam key. Just like a little bit of context about the game if you don't, for somehow you like have no idea what it is. Yeah, adventure mode is something that people don't know. Yeah, so that's the email. I don't really need to go more in depth than that. Fudge, GDC is really cool. If I recall, you're still like too young for GDC, but once you get old enough, like definitely go try it at least once. So it's I saw a video that Will Cheer made about his experience at GDC, and one of the things he said in that video that was so relatable to me and like why I love GDC is that everybody at GDC already by default gets you, and like you can have a conversation with, and they'll relate to your struggles to some extent, just like as a person who makes games and likes games. So I like it a lot. I always feel like GDC is 10,000 people that are not my friend yet, and that's, I don't know, it's like a comforting place for that reason. Okay, next thing, actual GDC. After Train Jam, we got to San Francisco, and then GDC happened for a week. For me, a lot of this was like meeting with people, talking to them about Sausage, or like talking about their game and giving feedback on their stuff. Nice, that's cool. Yeah, so for me, it was a lot of just like meeting people that I don't see very often, like catching up, and especially for me, this GDC was a lot of like hanging out with Chicago people who I don't see that much now that I don't live in Chicago. But My biggest like business oriented thing, I guess, was I met with the Nintendo Japan team to just talk about, you know, how to like what is the process for getting Sausage Sports Club on Switch in Japan, and that was cool. I basically just got a list of steps from them, and they asked if I was going to do translation stuff, and I was like, I want to, but I might not do it for launch. And they were like, that's fine, just once that's ready, like that will be better for your launch, so let us know and we can like, you know, start the rest of the process after that. So that was cool. So that kind of got me thinking about localization again, and I've known for a long time that I want to do that, and that's like great for the game. If I can get in multiple languages, then more people will be able to play it and more people will buy it, and that's cool. Japanese seems like a good choice, like because the Japan team is already like interested in the game, so if I can give them more excuses to like maybe help me out, that'd be cool. But also, if I have these hooks in the game of like my spreadsheet of all of the like text bits in the game and then their translation into whatever language, then I can send that to, you know, a company to get all the other languages that I think are gonna have a lot of players, or like make the game do better on Steam. Something that's been like a hot topic in games lately is that China is a really big new player on Steam. I think even more so than the US now. Like there are more users from China on Steam than there are US people, or it's close at least. And so like having a Chinese translation and being able to like put the, you know, on the Steam page or whatever that the game has a localization into China will make it come up on more people's screens, and like more people will be more likely to buy it in those other countries. Since I figured the game is going to be most purchased on Switch and on Steam after that, I also want to support the other ones that are big on Steam, to my knowledge, which is Russia and German, and then like I think eFigs as a bunch is like the next stuff. I guess eFiz. I think German is bigger on Steam than like the rest of eFigs, except I guess not English. I guess just FIS, French, Italian, Spanish. So, hey, welcome Jojo Hallbrook. Okay, so getting into actual localization stuff, this was kind of on my mind the second half of GDC as like, I really need to do this. Like I should start setting it up now because it has all these benefits, and I don't actually know how much work it's going to take until I start, so I should start it. So on my way back from GDC on Saturday, I basically like woke up, immediately went to the airport, and then spent the entire day on 2 planes, like one from SF to LAX, and then I was there for a couple hours, and then I was on a plane for another, I don't know, 5 hours or something. Yeah, Firewatch is super heavy. And their text also has a lot of nuance, and like it needs to, how do I explain it? Like it's not all just like text that you read and that's all that's there. Like the context and the way the actors say it in Firewatch is pretty important. So, and like if you're translating the game, you need to somehow like get that kind of stuff across, and I imagine that would be super hard. So what was I saying? Yeah, the text is basically the game. It's also it's voice acting in Firewatch, so it's like that's such a big part of it. I don't know that I would have related to much of the story if I was reading subtitles. So yeah. Okay. So anyway, I knew I was going to be on these flights and stuff all day, so I was like, I'm just going to jam on localization stuff. Like I'll just see how far I can get. So I got I2 localization, which is like, to my knowledge, the standard like the standard asset store asset for localization. I know they used it on Battle Chef Brigade, and I don't know other games that use it, but I'm sure there's a bunch of them. So I got that, and I had interfaced with it a little bit before, so I like just like generally knew things about it, but I hadn't like gone deep into it. So a lot of the plane ride was like, what is this? How do I use it? But the cool things about it that I've noticed so far, i2 has automated tools to scrub just like your whole game to find any kind of text field. And let me actually get this. Yeah, to find any text field, like in the main menu alone, there's probably like, I don't know, like 20 text fields or something. So if I do tools and then parse, this will let me go through all of the scenes in the game, or I could just select one or whatever. For me, like the manager scene is where all of my UI lives, so that's most of it. But you can do this, and then it will. I'm not going to click this because I already have done this, but if I recall, it just like fills out all of these with the terms of your UI, or of all the text components it found. It adds a component to them, all the localize. So mine's settings, that's weird. I thought I just changed that. Fresh localizations. Yeah, so it basically fills this out on whatever components you find. It like creates this localized thing and like matches the term here, and like takes that term and puts it in the other thing, and then fills this stuff out. And that's, I mean, it's like kind of a simple thing, like it's just adding a component and then matching it to this big list, but it's really useful that I didn't have to do that for every, I didn't have to manually do that for every text field. So that's cool. And then these are the two, this is like my test thing or whatever. And then the other really cool thing you can do with this tool is once you have the term, you can come in here on any one of these and be like, I want to click the T button here or the T button here, and it'll just like translate everything from, I think it uses the term, but if you click here, it will translate it from English, I think, or like your default. And then if you want to do it all at once, you can go to the languages menu, and it's really easy to add a new language. You can just click translate here, and it'll use like, when I say translate, I don't mean like this is the final localization that will be in the game. This is like a test to see that it's, that my text is updated correctly in game when I need it to be. I don't want to give that impression that I'm just going to hit Google Translate or whatever, and then that's what's going to ship in the game. But if you click translate on this, it'll go through all of the terms in the entire, my entire list here, and translate all of those to, from the default to whatever the other, one click translation. So that's cool. Another really useful tool is the spreadsheet thing, and I don't want this web thing to be on the screen. Not that anybody's gonna come in here and try to steal it, but this is like, I set up through this tool, I set up like this web service thing that interfaces with Unity and will take my localization stuff here, send it to a spreadsheet, and then I can edit that spreadsheet and then re-import it here, and so I could like send that spreadsheet to my Chinese translator, Japanese translator, whatever, and then when they get it back, I just copy paste their column of like the Chinese into the spreadsheet, and then I click import in Unity, and it just like does it. It like fixes all my terms so that they have Chinese in them now, and that's pretty sweet. There's also like an auto update thing, so like I don't know how the translation thing works, but if over the course of a week they're like continuously adding stuff to the translation spreadsheet, I can see that reflected in the game if I'm doing like automated, what do you call it, like automated integration or whatever, where a new build is coming every time I commit a change or whatever. So that's, I like this a lot so far. The one since I'm kind of saying like I like this tool and it's good and you should use it, I do want to also say rough edges. Oh, there's one more thing I want to say is good. You can use different languages per, or different fonts per languages, and something I think is really cool is I can say for Japanese, like, check this box and show me all of the characters I use in the Japanese language set, and then I could copy those and then create in TextMesh Pro. I can generate like the, you know, the atlas of characters that go into a font in TextMesh Pro, and I can only use the ones that are actually used in the game instead of just like every possible character that's in, you know, like a Japanese font, which is a lot of them, or in Chinese or whatever. You know, you can, once the game is done, like once text is locked, you can say, okay, what are all the characters I need? Maybe it's not all the characters that exist. Only have a big enough atlas to contain those, and that's, and if you regenerate the atlas with fewer or more characters, it doesn't break anything. It's just fine. So that's cool. I guess I can show that since this is likely to have changed. Let's do fonts. Right now I'm just using the like Google free like no-go thing. I'm not doing anything crazy. How do I do this again? Window, text mesh. Okay, so font source, regular. So this is just like where the font generation stuff happens. Okay, so I do custom characters. Is that right? Yeah, custom characters, and I just paste this thing that i2 like gave me from, you know, all the characters that are used. Great. There's a lot there. And then I just click this button. It'll just do it. Probably gonna take a while because now I have a lot of different characters. And you could use a smaller atlas. I'm just using a bigger one because they looked low quality if I used 512 by 512, just because there are so many more characters than there would be in English. Almost there, almost there. Oh, that's weird. All right, open that. I'll get to this in a minute, but now I want Unity up. There we go. Yeah, so this is what it creates, and this is a signed distance field, which is what TextMesh Pro uses to make text look really crisp at different sizes, like as opposed to having to generate a new atlas for each size that your text is representing in the game. Cool, so it's done. Let me save this over regular. So yeah, now I can jump over here and be like, show Japanese. And there's obviously some issues, like Sausage Sports Club as a title doesn't really translate, and apparently the word overworld doesn't have a match in Japanese. But again, this is just like a Google Translate, so it's, once I actually have a professional person do it, it will be better. What's next? Yeah, so a rough edge of this that I've run into that's kind of frustrating is that per day there's a limit of how many like requests you can send to the web service that internally uses Google Translate to like do this stuff. So if I'm you know, if I import a new language and let's say there are 1,000 terms or whatever, I guess I should have mentioned a term is kind of an identifier that represents like a piece of text in your game. So it could be like if there's like a play button, the button says play, you might have play that represents play, or if it's like if there's like a chunk of dialogue, you might want to represent that in a more like concise way that's descriptive of where it's at in the game rather than the content. So like this is like bad rap quest, Dirk recap dialogue, chunk 0. That's like when I see that, I immediately know where it lives. But for some stuff like bug museum, there's not really a simplification for that, so you can just use that as the term. And when you I'll get to this in a minute, but when you or I'll talk about it more in a minute, when you look up, for some reason you need to look up a translation during the game for any reason, you can use that term and say like, get the translation of the current language for this term. So yeah, so getting back to the Google Translate limit thing, if I like do a new language and I'm like, okay, I need to do Chinese now, and I hit translate all of the things and I have 1,000 terms, like that might be more than the limit of how many things you can do in a day. And I think this is likely just a UX issue of I click translate and it seemed like it was going, and then I click away and for some reason it stopped going, and but that still counts as like doing like some number, like 200 API calls or something. Point being, like there's a little bit of complexity that takes time to figure out, and it could either be like a bad bug or it could be that I'm just like stupid and I haven't figured it out yet. But I know at least there's like a hard limit on how many translation bits you can do per day. So if I click T here, that's like one translation. If what really happened is I kept clicking this and it wasn't working how I expected, so I started going through and just like clicking translate on each one of these, part of the game where I was doing a specific test, and I know each one of these is like one Google Translate API call, so I probably just hit that limit pretty fast. But from the documentation, it seems like this button kind of batches them all into one translate call instead of doing one per click or whatever. So still trying to figure that out. I just got that, Chris, the Athletic Organization of Encased Meat. It's good. Okay, so the next hard part is pretty annoying. I basically, like, on my as I was like getting ready to get on the second flight, which was from LAX to Austin, I was like at the point I've described so far where I like automated this process of replacing all the buttons. I was able to do the like online Google Translate of all the buttons, and I was like, cool, I can now play the menus in Japanese, and this works. That's awesome. Maybe this won't be as hard as I thought. But then I got into the game and like started the first dialogue with the character, and like, oops, didn't do that one yet. And so like I talked to the first character, the dialogue should have popped up, but I got an error instead of like or maybe I got like English and I was like, oh, I gotta go do that now. Like, how do I fix dialogue? And then so now the gross part comes in of real time, like in code, like when I assign text to a text thing in the world, whatever thing I'm assigning to it, I need to make sure that's translated into the proper language. So for that, there's a lot of places in the game where, and if you're not planning for localization, this will be true for your game too, probably. There's a lot of places in the game where I just like assign like a string literal, which is just like a place in code where I write like string thing equals do the thing. So that's a string literal. And there's a lot of places in the game where I do that just to like assign a button to say back or exit or the name of an arena or whatever. And the problem with doing that is that unless you write some like C# parsing tool to like fix all of those with localization, and even that wouldn't work because like you need context for that, and it's, you know, it's like an impossible problem to solve. You just need to be aware that localization exists and like prepare for it. So there's a few things I had to do to like kind of get started on this road. One of the things is the story quests in the game. Like I mentioned, I want to like have like a clear readable term for each of these, and when it's in the spreadsheet, I want it to be clear that like this quest of stuff is associated, and like within that this sequence of dialogue is associated, but each line is like kind of by requirement of how I structured the data of the game, it needs to be needs to be a distinct line, unless I want to do something weird and make the life of the translators hard. So what I had to do for this, because there are like 26 or 27 quests in the game, and each quest has maybe like 5 or 6 associated sequences of dialogue, or potentially more. I needed to make some tool that like automatically runs through all of the quests and like goes through all of the like properties or fields on that quest and says, is this a dialogue thing? Like if it is, then let's make a term for it, or sorry, let's make a term for each like chunk in that sequence, if that makes sense. Let me grab a quest so you can actually see what I'm talking about. So here's a good example of this, like intro dialogue. Every quest has one of these, and then there's 4 chunks within this dialogue sequence. And then on this quest, there's win, lose, flop is suspicious. There's Dirk recap, which is this is like between days in the season. Dirk is a character that like recaps what happened that day, and so every quest has one of those. So there's like 5 or 6 per quest, and then each one has an arbitrary number of chunks within that dialogue sequence. Oh man, welcome Fishrock 123 and Fall Killer. So I had to write this tool, and this tool loads all the prefabs of the type. This is like some utility function I've been using for a while, but I get all the prefabs of the quests. For each quest, I make a serialized object, which is, if you're not familiar with editor tools, that's basically like an editor-friendly representation of the object, which allows me to look at all of its properties and change them safely without having to make everything on it public. So if it's something that's serialized to the editor, like something you could see in the inspector, then it's something I can change when it's in the serialized object form. So I iterate through all of the properties on this quest, and then I check if it's a dialogue chunk. We know just like through context, a dialogue chunk is always an array, so then we can go through the array size of this thing, and then for each chunk in the array of chunks, then we make a new term, and if the term doesn't exist yet, then we want to make a new term. And this is kind of weird and like kind of up to your implementation if you were to do something like this, but basically I want it to be that if I click this like build out terms again, if it already exists, I only want to update it and change this data if the new one is different from the previous one, which is kind of arbitrary, but it lets me save only if something is changed, I guess. So that's like it's useful in that when I go to my like version control to update or to like save what I've been working on, I will only like save this. I'll only save all these prefabs of quests if I've actually changed them. So That's the core idea there. So this tool was great. It ended up taking a very short amount of time to run through all of the quests. And the other thing this gives me that I forgot to mention is right here, dialogue term prop. This is on each dialogue chunk, I save a string that tells this dialogue chunk what term is related, so that when I'm reading it in dialogue, like in the game, I can look up the translated version of, you know, whatever dialogue chunk I'm trying to read right now through this term in the localization manager. And that's like, that was the key thing I needed to kind of let my dialogue reader like actually connect with the localization manager. Like each chunk needs to know how to get the localized version of itself, since it doesn't contain, like each chunk itself doesn't contain any context about itself. It could I guess reproduce this just through like knowing what object it's a child of, but it's, I don't know, it's faster to just have a string on it, and it's like more clear, and I don't want to have any weird like hard to read logic in the dialogue manager any more than I already do. So I like this solution. Okay, so that's dialogue. That's like one thing I had to do. In every quest, I stupidly, another example of a thing I would do is during a quest, if I need to go from, if I need to tell the player like go find a certain character in the world, I slag out up here on the left, I slag out a panel that's like go find whatever character. And then it, you know, it says that text, but that text is defined in just like a string literal in the quest, and that kind of sucks because for a couple reasons. One, that means I have to, like, when I do localization, I have to find every place in the entire game that I pop out that side thing by passing it a string as like text to be displayed, and I have to fix that. The other thing is, it's that could mean that I have identical strings in different quests. Like if there's another quest where somebody needs to also say find Remy, and that string literal is duplicated somewhere else, and that's not inherently bad, but it's just like kind of weird that there are two terms that do the same thing that are in different places. So it's weird. The other very bad part that I still haven't really dealt with yet. What? Why is that game still open? That's funny. Oh man, they all just were taking a long time to open, I guess. Weird. Yeah, the other part that I haven't really encountered or I haven't really dealt with yet is for all of these string literals in code, just like this find Remy thing, until I actually make the term for this and put it into this list, this is not gonna work. Like this is just, I have it, this is a wrapper for the localization manager that throws a warning with a little bit of context if this term that I'm trying to pass to it isn't actually in the localization like master list or whatever. So I actually have to go through, and this might sound like it's a rare case or whatever, this find Remy thing, but I do this multiple times per quest for all 26 quests or 27 quests. So it's actually a huge pain in the ass. So there might be some way to automate that, where I could like maybe I could do like search all the code for a locutils translate, and then try and see if that term is represented in my local list, and if it's not, then add it. That's probably a good way to go, but I don't really know how to, I haven't really done that before, where I would parse through all of the scripts in the game and try to find a specific string, but I'm sure there's a way to do it. I'm gonna write that down because I don't want to manually make all these terms. Search scripts for translate like a term out So I kind of like that as a solution. What else? What else is weird? What else has sucked about localization so far? Yes, okay, I know another one. I've kind of already fixed this, but maybe there's another one. Okay, cool, it's still here. So previously, the way that I would handle kind of one-off sequences that I know are going to be the same every time, and I didn't have a prefab existing to represent this like part of the game, is I would just encode, I would manually write, this is a dialogue chunk, and I would just have it in code. The problem with this is that when read by the dialogue panel or whatever, this is represented as, this would be like 4 different keys, or 4 different terms I should say, in the example I showed before of like the story quest dialogue stuff. And that's kind of weird. But I didn't want to have like 4, and I guess this isn't necessarily a bad way to do it, but I didn't want to have 4 terms in like an array or something and have to make a, I'm doing a bad job explaining this. Basically, I knew there was a bunch of places in the game where I had done this stupid thing where I like represent data in this way. I didn't want to have to go through each one and like set up a different term for each one of these lines, and then have to write a new function to write to pass in multiple terms to be read as like a sequence of dialogue. I guess that's kind of like the core of it. So instead, I wrote a stupid hack where there's one term to represent this kind of sequence of 4 things, these 4 things, and then when it's actually like in the term list, and I put in the English to get translated to the other languages or whatever, I just put all of these strings like this, you know, these 4 strings in as one big string and separate them by a star, which is probably not the best character to do that with, but, and then here I just like translate the one term, you know, that's that big star separated long string. I split it here, and then I do the same thing I do here, like make this dialog chunk list, but I just do it right there where I need it. So it's like a memory thing. It like allocates garbage when I do this. So looking at it again, like this is probably not the ideal way to do it. It would probably be better to actually have 4 terms for each of these separate things, but I gotta think about this more. Basically, the point I want to make about this is that adding this new thing this late in development like creates a bunch of new problems and forces me to revisit like the structure of a lot of my data and how I pass data into different systems, and it's pretty bad. It's like a kind of shitty problem. So now I'm really concerned about about 3 things. One is, how long is it going to take me to go through the game and actually like fix all of these like data passing points where it's like I have to rewrite either the read dialogue, or I have to rewrite this to be friendly with the term thing, or any other similar place where like dialogue is represented in a weird way or dialogue is passed in a weird way. I gotta figure out how all of that like relates to like the localization system. That's problem 1. Problem 2 is because there are now like multiple languages, that's like kind of a, I'm trying to think of what the factor is. Maybe it's logarithmic, but it's like there are so many bugs with each language. There are enough new bugs where I as a person can't recognize the bugs because I don't know, you know, I can't read Japanese or Chinese. So now I need like somebody who does know these languages and also is like somewhat familiar with the game in English to like read it and like recognize whether it's right or not. and to just like find all these bugs and weird edge cases, because especially because the structure of adventure mode, where most of this dialogue is like non-linear, and there's a lot of content, and you could play the game 5 times and not see all of the quests. So it's like I feel like I need like unit tests or something, where it's just like, here are all of the quests in a row, and also here's like a way to speed through it. So that's problem 2 that I'm worried about, which is a huge problem. That's like a huge time sink that I think on Switch for sure, like Japanese at launch is like a maybe, and then after that is like over time I'm gonna really, you know, support more localizations. But at launch it would be, I really don't think it would be possible to do more than, for me, like for my situation where I'm like a 1-person team and I've got 1 person doing part-time QA, it would just be impossible to do. And it's probably impossible to do Japanese, but gotta see it. And then the 3rd problem is translation costs. I didn't mention this before, but as I started exporting out all of these terms or whatever, I noticed that there is actually a shit ton of dialogue in the game. Let me bring up the spreadsheet of translations. There are 1,000 terms right now, I think, but that doesn't mean that there are 1,000 lines of dialogue necessarily, because some of it's like BS. I don't think there are any spoilers in this. Yeah, so in the spreadsheet there are over 1,000 terms. Not, like I said, not all of these are like actual full lines of dialogue. Some of the time it's just like a shout or a ... and that's probably like, I don't know, like 10-15% of it. But it's more than I expected for sure, and I don't know specifically the costs, how translation costs work, like if it's per word or per character or per sentence. In any of those states, it's like there's a lot to do, so it might actually be like a huge cost to translate all of this stuff. So those are the 3 problems I'm worried about. Whoop. Okay. So I'm glad I'm talking about this on the weekly update, because I hadn't really like said all of this out loud, and like it seems like a huge impossible problem to solve before launch. So it may just be like I don't do it at launch, and now I know because I've tried it at least. Okay. So what's next? I need to make a decision about localization soon. Kind of leaning towards not for launch. It's kind of a big scary problem. After that is bug fixes and polish for next lot check submission. I submitted like the week that Train Jam started, like maybe Monday or something that week, and I got back a few fails, which I can't remember what they were now, but it was all just little things that I've since already fixed or are like super easy fixes. So I need to fix that stuff. More so I would say is polish. Like there's a lot of feedback coming in that are things that I think are very much worth fixing, like the adventure mode, like not really understanding what's happening, so just trying to like add context here and there to fill that in. And yeah, so that's that. Overworld needs optimization. This is kind of like a big priority thing for me, because in the second half, especially of adventure mode, once there are like, I don't know, 5 NPC characters in the overworld, and you could have up to 4 characters in the overworld, and the overworld's like a big place with a lot of physics objects and a lot of art. It just becomes like this big this big bog, and at the end, especially at the end of adventure mode, I can't just turn off, you know, if like different biomes are locked, I can just turn off stuff in that biome, and that reduces the cost or like makes the overworld more efficient or whatever. But once you have every biome unlocked, I can't really just like turn off all the physics objects in some biome. So I'm still trying to figure that out. I think that's probably going to take a few days at least to figure that out. And then the last thing, not the last thing, but the other thing on my list here is more toys in the overworld. A lot of people have fun and get distracted by stuff in the way that I want them to, but I want it to be more. Like I want people to just like, I told somebody I want people to spend as much time in the overworld like messing around with their friends as they do in the actual like playing the game part. So that's something I still need to add more toys for. And toys isn't like a new game or a new like piece of code. Even it could just be like a piece of art that's like a fun physics object to knock around. Like a basketball and a hoop is like, you know, it's like an hour of work to make a hoop and a ball and put a trigger on the basketball hoop so you get some coins when the ball goes through it. Or maybe 2 hours of work. So that's that stuff. I can't really think of anything else I feel the need to talk about this week. I also still need to fill out the rest of the dev commentary stuff. I still only have like 5 of those, I think. And I'm gonna lean towards making them like less. I think I talked about this before. I'm gonna like do more of them that are rougher rather than doing fewer that are more like carefully, finely produced. Just because I would rather have more content than like a few 20-second like very high quality audio, like very well cut together. I do like 30 takes on each one. That's like a cool, I don't know, I want to reward players who get that far into the game with a lot of content rather than very little like high produced content, if that makes sense. I feel like those people that get that far are going to be more willing to put up with like a slightly lower production value in favor of more content. I could be wrong about that. All right, that's it. That's the update. Came in at just an hour. Now I'm done. Unless there are questions, I'm gonna get off and then get to work. I either need to undo this localization stuff if I'm gonna like alt it here, or maybe I could branch. Thanks, Fudge. I'll wait like 30 seconds for questions, then I'll dip. Whoop. Thanks, Alex. Okay, cool. Thanks for coming, y'all. Hopefully see you next week. I might do like a weekly, not a weekly. I might do a work session sometime this week. if I'm feeling like there's something interesting to show. But that's it. All right. See you next week. Thanks for coming.